Yo, what's up, lords and ladies of the realm? It's your boy, E the Prince. How y'all doing today? Okay, I wanted to make a. Hopefully, it'll be quicker. My first video that I've done in a long time was like an hour and 15 minutes. UAPs, all different stuff. Hopefully, we'll keep this one a lot shorter. What I wanted to talk to you about today: shadow beings, the HATMAN. Um. So first, let's go over the HATMAN, which in my experience, I've definitely had some experience with these shadow beings that you just see out of the corner of your eye and your peripheral. I wouldn't, some people say shadow beings, HATMAN, some people morph them together, say they're the same thing. Some people say the HATMAN is a completely different entity or a separate thing. Um, I never saw the quote unquote HATMAN. But in that, when I was I was little, probably 4 to 6, as far back as I can remember. I mean, a lot of little kids are afraid of the dark or, stuff like that. And I've heard people say that that's in our DNA that goes back from when we were cavemen and blah, 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 all that stuff. Maybe very well true. Who knows? Um, I've had the experience also in later life, in my adult life. Um, Nothing recently. It's been years. But when I was a little kid, I was terrified to sleep in my room by myself. So much, in fact, that I would sneak into my parents' room and I would bring my pillow and my blanket. And the way the room was set up, there was a dresser and then, probably 6 foot of space and then my parents' bed. I would lay next to the dresser so I didn't get stepped on if somebody got out of bed. But I would lay there, and it got to the point where my parents would lock the door. It used to aggravate my dad a lot. It got to the point where they would lock their door at night, and I'm sure it's the same today where, you change your door handles or whatever in your house, and most of the time there's a little hole and it looks almost like a flathead screwdriver where most people put the keys on top of the door frame, or at least in my experience. Which is kind of funny when you're like, I want to lock the door, but then the key's right there. But when I grew up, they were all above each door. Now, I was little, and I had a blanket, and I would do some straight James Bond stuff, and I would take this blanket and as softly as I could, so the key wouldn't ting 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 ting. And there was times where I had gotten caught in the act, but I would take this blanket and Indiana Jones that bird and hit the key, and then the key would calm down. And I mean, I would, as quietly as I could, even if I had to turn the doorknob just a touch or do whatever I could to make it silent, I would open that door, go in there. And I don't remember, I mean, I was terrified. And I never really, it was always kind of one of those, you got in trouble, or as a little kid, it appeared like, oh, I'm in trouble, or I wasn't really like, I never got beat for it or nothing like that. But it was very displeasing, we'll say. And it was like, you need to go sleep in your own room. Like, you're getting too old for this and that and the other. And I mean, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. Now, in hindsight, if you were to ask, what were you terrified of? I couldn't tell you. It's like it's been wiped, or it was so traumatic that I can't remember. There's not a specific thing. However, in that, when I was little, I used to have this reoccurring dream. And it's really the only reoccurring dream that I've ever had in my life, where I was in that boiler room of Freddy Krueger and he was chasing me around the entire dream. And I mean, it was just like a state of sheer terror. Now, I don't really remember ever having that dream when I would sleep in my parents' room. So I don't know if there's a correlation there or not, but I was absolutely terrified to no end. Now, in my later life, and actually I just heard it again. I was watching the channel, the Y Files, awesome show. Go check that out. Oh, Hecklefish. Uh, if you don't know the Y Files, they do some cool stuff or whatever. Go check them out. But in there, they were talking about shadow people, and the host, which I can't remember his name offhand. He was talking about he had an experience, and he's like, I'm not a believer of none of this weird stuff, whatever. And he was like, that's probably the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me. And I think his was more of a sleep paralysis type situation. But in there, they said that the quote unquote the HATMAN, that's where Freddy Krueger came from. That's what he's kind of based off of, is the HATMAN depictions of the shadowy figure, sometimes red eyes, sometimes no face. And that's where the character of Freddy Krueger supposedly comes from, which I thought was very interesting, especially now in hindsight, looking back and going, that was the reoccurring dream that I had, was Freddy Krueger. Now, I have, in my adult life, my dreams are weird. Most of my dreams I don't really remember. Lately, I've been remembering some, but historically, for probably 20 years of my adult life, the dreams that I have are either people that I know or don't know, not necessarily. The people that I know, they're always off a touch. Like, I remember one time I had a dream with my grandma, and it was like we were at a picnic table and it was all good and everything was fine. And then the second I noticed that her eyes were blue. Now, in the dream, I noticed one eye was blue, one eye was green. And the second I noticed it, she went to attack me. And I ended up stabbing her in the eye that was off, actually, and running off. And then I woke up. I always have dreams like that where someone's attacking me, shooting me, or I'm in some sort of a altercation with someone. We're exchanging gunfire, stuff like that. Crazy dreams. Those are the majority of dreams that I remember. And now that has almost seemed to stop. And now I just have random dreams about weird stuff or whatever. Dreams. But for probably 20 years or more of my life, which I'm 38 at this point in my life, it was constant dreams of people attacking me, getting into gunfights, crazy altercations of some sort of way, shape, or form. So that one reoccurring dream of Freddy Krueger, I remember it vividly. And it was just like one of the scenes in the movie where it's that boiler room and there's those kind of like metal stairs and, all this, the steam and the smoke. And it's kind of like an orange red lit area. And old Freddy's just chasing you everywhere. You know what I mean? Um, and I think anytime that he would ever actually like get to me, if he ever did, I would wake up. Now, years and years passed, and I had that Freddy Krueger dream when I was, little. I never really had it in my teenage years or adult years or anything like that. But I have had I know I dreamt one night, and when I woke up, I couldn't remember the dream, but I looked at my arm, and it was before I had all the tattoos on my arm, and there was a handprint on my arm. And not so much the handprint as it was probably this much of the fingers. And it was perfect 5 fingers, and it was bigger than my hand. And me and my wife were talking about it, and I was like, look at, I was like, you didn't grab me, did you? Or like, what's the deal with this? And I was showing her, and she's like, no, I didn't grab you. Like, what? I put my hand up to it, and it was probably a fingertip, a joint's worth on my fingers, bigger than my handprint. Where when I put it around my hand, it would be like right here. You know what I mean? It was just off where my hand couldn't cover the tip. I couldn't grab it completely and make it look like it was me that had done it. It was just a little bit larger. And that's one where I was just like, man, that's weird. You know what I mean? Like, where does that come from? I think that helped me, and especially my dealings as a child, to where I have 2 children, and there was a point in my one of my son's lives where he was terrified at night, and their room is right by ours, and he would wake up screaming and being like, get away from me, and this and that and the other, and blah. And of course, there's a little part of you that goes, little kids, they're scared, whatever. But with my experience that I had when I was little, I didn't just write it off. I wasn't just like, hey, you're a little kid, go back to sleep, no worries. And it got to the point where it would happen a couple times a week. And I got to the point to where I've dealt with this kind of stuff over my life, where it will rear its head, you could say, and then it will go away. And then it'll come back and it'll go away. And I remember I had gotten to a point where I was just like, it didn't bother me anymore. I was almost desensitized to it. And I had told my son, because I didn't know what to do for him. And I was like, you tell them to come talk to daddy. You tell them to come talk to me. Come pick on somebody their own size. I'll deal with them. And I would ask him, what does it look like? Can you see it? And he had said before, it's just a black figure with red eyes. And then we had noticed one day, my wife and me, that he had a bruise on his arm, and it was a handprint. And he was telling us about it, like, it grabbed me, and then we see it, and I kind of looked at her, and she looked at me, and it's just like, what do we do here? You know what I mean? What do we do here? And in fact, I had a security job at the time, and I worked overnights, and it was for a car dealership that they had what you call an overflow lot, to where they had a bunch of cars delivered that wouldn't fit on their lot. And at the time, they had a bunch of cars getting stolen, tires, rims, all that kind of stuff. And so it was my job to look at these few lots, watch them. And it finally got so bad to a point where we had multiple people in different lots. But at first, it was just 12-hour shifts at night, and you're going from lot to lot to lot to lot and just kind of rotating around, sit on one lot for a little while. And during that time, I did a lot of research. I listened to podcasts and stuff like Project Camelot, which is not really any longer on YouTube. I think they kind of got kicked off YouTube. The host is Carrie Cassidy. She deals with like UFOs and my lab stuff and a bunch of different fringe conspiracy, whatever ufology type things. And she had a friend who she had on, which he's now no longer on this plane of existence. Rest in peace, Jordan Maxwell. And in that, Jordan Maxwell, if you guys don't know him, and if you're into even like politics, he knows a lot about politics and the hidden meanings of words. And he's got some stories about when he was younger and UFOs and Illuminati stuff. I mean, he was just a plethora of information. And I think he knew Manly P. Hall. He knew Zachariah Sitchin. He knew a lot of people. And one night I was listening to that. I was listening to an interview with him. And he was talking about Hollywood and why Hollywood is called Hollywood and the elites. And it goes back to druids, and they used magic wands. Similar kind of to like this one, which this turned out, this was a plant that I had grown. And it's funny because it's an exact, to me, what you call a cubit. It was funny how that worked out when I cut it. But, and look at the head of it is, I didn't carve this or do anything to it. This is just how it is when I cut it. It looked like a snake with its mouth cut off or something, the front of its face cut off. So I thought that was kind of interesting or cool. But anyhow, which that is not Hollywood, by the way. But he was talking about how Hollywood was used for making magical wands. And as you can tell, I have a wand or whatever that I've made. I also have my staff that came out from a tree that was in the front of my house. I thought this is a cool part of it, that it has a natural heart in it, which I always thought was kind of cool. But that's a whole side conversation in itself. The point is, I've always been a little like, I don't want to say woo woo, but I believe in energy and things like that. Well, I believe in nature spirits and all this different stuff. I remember too, when I was little, I grew up in a very Christian household. And I remember we were watching some movie or something, and I was probably 4, and seeing druids in their robes. And I was like, I want to be one of them. I used to be one of them. And I'm very into like Atlantis and different stuff like that. And, you know, that was always like, no. That's bad. Pagans, this and that. We don't do that. So anyways, I was listening to this story from Jordan talking about Hollywood and the different meanings and all that kind of stuff. And on the lot that I was at that particular time, there was kind of one of them. It wasn't really a median, but it separated 2 parking lots. And it was kind of a big hill that had grass on it, and it had trees every 50 feet or 100 feet or however long it was. And the very center tree, the silhouette of it, I even took a couple pictures of it at night because it backed up to a building and you could go behind that building, you know what I mean? So I was on the back side of it from this other parking lot. And the silhouette of it kind of actually, this is a Japanese maple that I had drawn. Or let's see, there's a cherry blossom. But in this cherry blossom is, I don't know if you can tell or not, it's kind of crooked off to the side. Okay. This tree wasn't like that. It was perfectly straight, but it had this big, almost like broccoli head plume. And I would just see it, and it would be dark at night. And then the building behind it had a, like the floodlights, or it, this was like a strip mall. So it was the back of a strip mall, and each little shop had a light above it. So I would sit and see this silhouette of this, and I would think, like, that looks like the tree of life. And it just was cool looking. This particular one caught me. And they were all the same kind of trees, but this is the only one that really, it had a distinct look or feel to it. So I used to ride my bike, actually. I drove my SUV up there, and I had a bike rack on the back, and I would roll around the lot, and I would listen to podcasts, and I would put my bike back up, go to another lot and ride around or check that lot. And I remember listening to this with Jordan, and I drove by the tree, and he was talking about magic wands, and I was like, I wonder if that would help my son. I wonder if I could make something. And I literally went to the tree and was going to break a branch off, and something stopped me from doing it. And mind you, like, I can see the ground. There's maybe little tiny stick twigs, you know what I mean? But nothing thick, nothing like a thumb there's nothing big. And I just stopped, and it was like something stopped me, and it was just like, it's not right to just take it. And again, that sounds weird to most people, where they're like, it's a freaking stick. It's, who cares? Take the stick, cut the tree down, do whatever you want to it. And I couldn't bring myself to do it. And I had just thought, like, I really wish I had a piece of this. And I was on my bike, so I rolled past, and I don't know how far this strip mall was, but it was big, you know what I mean? And so I went down to the other end of it, and they had a little cut through. I came around, went back around, whatever. The next time I came around to that tree, there was the perfect little branch laying on the parking lot, because it overhung just a touch, right where I just was, right where I was just thinking it would be nice to have a stick of that. And I looked at it and just smiled and looked at that tree and just said, thank you. I appreciate it. And so I sat in that parking lot, and I think I worked on it for 2, maybe 3 days, cutting it down to the size that it needed to be, and whittling on it and getting all the bark off of it, making a nice shape that I wanted. And I sat there when it was all finished, and I oiled it down and made it was nice, smooth, is nice looking shtick. And I prayed over it, and I gave it a purpose. And I've always kind of had, like, for lack of a better term, muses or intuition that just tells you, walks you through stuff, tells you how to do something. And so I just prayed over that stick, that wand. And I was like, protect my children. Anything that comes in here that tries to do them harm at night, handle that. Do that for me. Protect them. And I gave it a name, which I won't say. And I gave it a purpose. And I told my kids about it. And actually, this is probably 8, 9 years ago. And it's still, I set it above their door. It's on their door frame, and it's still up there. It sits up there. And oddly enough, since that point in time, they haven't had any problems. And that's the other thing. I have 2 children, and one of them was never affected, and the other one was. They sleep in the same room. They have, each of their beds are kind of on each opposite ends of the room. And my one son, it reminded me of me when I was little and just helpless and terrorized. And I did that and gave that to them. And ever since then, he has not had an issue. There's been no more shadow beings, HATMAN, none of that stuff. It's just left him alone. Thank God. Because I think there's a lot of people that go through this kind of stuff, which if you have experiences with anything like this, leave it down in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If I could help in any way, I'd like to try. But I recommend you do the same kind of thing. I mean, you have more power than you know. Ask your angels, your guides, ask God, spirit, whatever it is that you believe in. And if you ask with an open heart and you really mean it, I think you'll get an answer that you're looking for, or something that will lead you to another answer, or some sort of conclusion that will help you. Ever since I did that, he's never had an issue anymore. Every now and again, too, I'll even ask him, like, and it's been years. I don't just ask him every couple months or anything like that. It was like 5 years went by, and I was like, hey, remember when that such and such happened? Yeah. You don't have any problems like that anymore, do you? No. Oh, no. So there's something to be said about the power of spirit, the power of having an open heart, asking respectfully for something, and receiving it. A lot of people, I grew up in a Christian household, like I said, and ask and you shall receive. And I believe that's true. But I think a lot of the times we just ask willy-nilly for stuff, or we're not really sure, or whatever. And they say, ask God, and you'll always get an answer. Sometimes the answer is no, which, like being a little kid when you want something or whatever, even being an adult, ask your boss for something, the answer is no, sometimes. And, there's another solution somewhere out there for you. Lastly, the last point I want to say or touch on is I had another weird experience, in my dreams, where I would say that I was always fighting with something, man. It was just always like, hey, everything's all good. And then now we're fighting with something. There's 3 or 4 people, and I can tell they mean you harm. Guns come out, weapons come out of some sort, and now you're in the middle of it. You know what I mean? I had a dream one time, and this is my adult life, and I only showed it to 2 people. And I think since then I've had a phone or 2 new, you know what I mean? I've gotten rid of old phones and whatever. I swore I took a picture of it, and I can't find it. But I only told 2 people, or showed 2 people, and one was my wife and one was my dad. In this dream, I got shot in my left arm twice. I had like vaguely remembered the dream when I woke up. It was, you know what I mean? You wake up and whatever, and you go about your day. And then I was changing my shirt that day, and I'd forgotten about the dream. You know how they just kind of go when you wake up sometimes, or you remember a little bit of them for a little bit, and then it's just. I had gotten shot by this guy in my arm twice, my left arm. I changed my shirt that day and happened to look down, and I had 2 bruises on my arm that, I mean, they were perfect, like a 40 caliber bullet, 45, something like that. Perfect round circles, 2 of them. Bruises. Boom, boom. And that's when it came back to me, and I was like, oh, wait, what? And I told my wife, and she's kind of looked at me, and I'm like, I know, right? And I told my dad, and it's like, what do you tell somebody? Or what do you say to somebody that tells you that? It's like, that's crazy, or that, you know what I mean? It's just like, what else do you say? There's nothing much else to say. So if anything, or if anyone out there knows this correlation between the dream state and bringing back physical marks, I would love to hear your take on it or your experience with it in the comments, because that's one that I still have not figured out. It's hard to wrap my mind around how it's possible. It's hard to wrap my mind around you're in another plane of existence, or your consciousness is, and to bring that back is weird. That's like, and I hadn't hit my arm. Same thing with the handprint, right? I'm not Billy Badass by any means, but I don't just let people put hands on me. You know what I mean? Like, especially not in my adult life and stuff. You're not going to put hands on me. And if you do, I'm going to remember it, you know? And so that's just odd to me. It was a weird experience. But if anyone has any sort of answers or insight on that, I would love to hear it, because that's still one that I'm still chewing on. It's like if you broke your leg in a dream and then you got up and you're like, oh my gosh, what? And you got to go to the hospital and it's just weird. Which again, I got shot in the dream, and it's not like I had holes in my arm, but those bruises, perfect circles, perfect, perfect circles. I mean, trying to find something that, here we go. Just perfect. Bloop, bloop. How does that happen? I don't know. So if you got any insight on that, share it in the comments. I want to know. I want to hear. Until then, thanks for spending the time with me. I do appreciate it. I'm trying to get more comfortable making these videos and going to be covering stuff like this. So, welcome to the kingdom. Subscribe if you want, all that jazz. If not, love you anyway. And holler at your boy. It's you, the Prince. Welcome to the kingdom, lords and ladies.